On the Majority Report, Emma Vigeland is out today. Joining us now, Sharon Lerner, writer covering health and the environment for ProPublica. Sharon, welcome back to the program. You and I definitely talked about, I think, multiple times over the course of your year-long 10-part series on what was going on in the EPA. The series launched, I think it was in mid-2022, but it was what had happened at the EPA during the Trump administration. Remind us of what you had reported over the course of that year.
Yeah. So I reported on a group of whistleblowers. These were scientists who worked at the EPA as assessors of new chemicals. They were in this division called the New Chemicals Division. And what they do is they look at chemicals that are submitted by companies that want to introduce them to the market. And their job is to figure out how these chemicals affect human health and the environment. And if they see red flags, major problems, they're supposed to identify them and then ask the companies, figure out ways so that the public won't be exposed. So they have to mitigate the risks that they find. And what these whistleblowers had told me was that they were under intense pressure not to identify problems. And when they did find problems, hazards that the chemicals posed, they were being pressured to remove them from documents, or lessen them, downplay them. Sometimes actually their bosses removed the evidence of hazards from their reports. And so, as you said, this turned into a 10-part series that went into incredible detail about the different kinds of chemicals and different kinds of problems they were facing and identifying.
What can you explain to us the structure of an agency like this? I mean, there has been, EPA, FDA. I mean, there are other agencies that, OSHA, I guess, and agencies that are out there that are trying to protect citizens in various ways, right? I mean, some from the unhealthy environment, some from poisonous drugs or food that is tainted, food inspections. Can you where is the line between who are the types of people? You have scientists who are there who can be working there for 15, 20, 25 years, I guess, 5. And then you have management and administrators and political appointees. Can you give us a sense of the almost the taxonomy and the sort of the types of people or what their incentive structure would be at any given time?
Okay, so we're talking about the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. The mission of the agency is to protect human health and the environment. And within that agency, there's a division of toxics, and within that, they have existing chemicals and new chemicals. So we're talking about within the new chemicals. The people who reached out to me and blew the whistle were scientists who have worked there, some for only a few years, some for longer. And the managers who were interfering with their work were not political appointees. These were people, career scientists and careers EPA staff members. And I should say that the problems that I specifically wrote about in that series began under the Trump administration. They were not entirely resolved at the end of that administration. And I know that they would all say that they're not entirely resolved right now. So these are problems that did have their roots in the Trump administration when the pressure from industry really reached a peak. And when I say industry here, I mean companies that are submitting their chemicals to the EPA that want them to be able to hit the market as soon as possible. And sort of the timing of this has been a real issue in this part of the EPA. Basically, the companies want them to be able to go to market as soon as possible so they can make money off them. That's what they do. But what happens is that the assessors need time to actually look at the chemicals. Often they come with no information about them. There's no science provided by the companies because the law doesn't require it. So these health assessors are digging up information on similar chemicals based on their structure and trying to figure out how they affect the human body and trying to compare them. And, so it's a complicated process that takes time. So that time became sort of an issue in this.
So, okay, but the Corporation X wants their new chemical to be released. They're going to use it for, I don't know, it's some business application in manufacturing, whatever it is. And these scientists are saying, I need more time to look at this stuff. Their manager comes over and goes, what's going on here? Why is it taking so long? What leverage does the corporation have with this manager? Like, does the corporation go to the manager and say, "Hey, man," and the manager, it seems to me, go, does it make the manager's life any worse to say, "We'll get back to you"?
Well, in fact, the companies do in fact approach the folks who work at EPA and are in frequent communication with them, and then also sometimes the pressure comes from lawmakers where. A company might reach out to their member of Congress, their representative, and say the EPA is, dragging its feet and we want to bring our product to market, and I write about that in the series, the different ways that the pressure is exerted on these folks. I mean, they had what they call the hair on fire situations, which is when some important, powerful person is leaning on the agency and saying, get this done. And so the managers are very much feeling this pressure from outside and then sort of passing it on to the people who are doing the work and saying, finish this, get it done. Okay, and the simplest way to get it done is to say there aren't any problems, next.
Okay, so we have, and I understand like lawmakers will respond. I mean, if I've got Pfizer in my district or in my state and they're, saying, we hire this many people, we donate this amount of money, we want this drug, and a lawmaker calls and says, but you better get this going because I'm going to make you file all sorts of type of reports and justify your budget. Does that come also from the political appointees within the administration?
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're not talking about pharmaceutical drugs, right?
Right. I'm just using that as an example, although I'm sure that happens with the FDA. But go ahead.
Right. Yes. So are we saying, does it come from the elected members of Congress? Yes.
And what about within the administration? I imagine there are political appointees who also have these relationships with whatever the chemical company is, and they do the same thing as the electeds.
Yeah, I wasn't hearing honestly about that so much. I was hearing more about it coming through the career scientists and staff members.
So you don't know what inspires them to do it.
Well, I think in some cases we do. I think we know that sometimes they meet with in one of the cases I wrote about, one of the scientists was being pressured to change a report. He did not want to change a report. And so a meeting was scheduled and he was not invited with a representative of the company that made the chemical, and the report he had written was changed. And so we know that it was the company that made the chemical,
Well, it was the company that made the chemical, but the report's not changed necessarily by the company. The report's changed by the administrator, and I'm just curious.
Right, not the administrator of the EPA, but
no, like the middle management, I guess. I'm just curious as to what leverage does the company have with middle management at EPA?
Well, so the pressure, it does come from above them, right? It comes from their bosses for sure. And this is a political issue. Like if you look at Project 2025, they, of course, the Heritage Foundation's guide for the next Republican president. And, they have a chapter on the EPA. And one of the things that they call for is for the speeding up of the approval of new chemicals. So this is kind of an issue that's been identified as, a sort of, red tape slowing down business, by from outside the agency, right?
Yeah, and I guess I'm just curious as to like how that. I mean, I understand how they can put pressure on the scientists because your piece outlines it. Now that we have the inspector general has basically validated the claims of 3 of these whistleblowers that they were unjustly reassigned or that they were, they were harassed, et cetera, et cetera. And I get it when a congressperson calls, some middle management person at the EPA and says, your boss is going to be pissed at you because I'm going to make your boss come in front of my committee and justify X, Y, and Z, and you're going to be in trouble for this. But I am curious as to like, are there other routes in which these corporations follow, i.e., through the administration? Because it started during the Trump years, but I mean, presumably corporations always want their chemicals to be quickly approved and that they always want less red tape. So like, why did it start during the Trump years as opposed to, let's say,
it increased. I think it was the particular issues that I was writing about came up during the Trump administration. But as I said, they continued beyond it. And the pressure, yes, does come from elected officials, but also directly from companies that contact the EPA for sure.
But what is their leverage? It's just like they're going to go, like, if you don't do what we say, we're going to go talk to, elected or something like this.
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
And so where are we now with this? Like, what is there improvement? Like, what does the administration do when they come in, a new administration, that would change this dynamic?
What could a new administration do?
What could or do? Yeah.
Or did.
Well,
so after some of my pieces ran, the Biden administration said that they were making improvements to the Division of New Chemicals, and they set up some new panels that are supposed to, pay attention to scientific integrity. And after the Inspector General's report came out, I think it was last week, they said that they would be updating their whistleblower training for all the staff. And I should say, you mentioned that, the Inspector General's report validated their claims. It did validate their claims of retaliation, but there are more reports that are expected that will deal with the substantive claims, because they actually put out a huge amount of material to the IG and to me that showed, it was not just about retaliation, it was about the very specific changes they were being asked to, and in some instances required to make. And it's about, chemicals that were sometimes approved. So there's a lot of substantive material that the IG has not dealt with yet.
Why does the IG sequence it in that way?
I have no idea. And why did it take more than 3 years for this? From the first report, was it 3 years? Quite a long time.
2 years, I think, from 22. Well, at least from, probably close to 3. Anyway.
A very long time. And I don't know that when we'll see the reports on the substantive issues.
Lastly, hard to imagine that these middle management people are retaliating against these scientists if the scientists' substantive issues weren't legitimate in the first place, right? Like,
of course, yes.
I mean, we got to wait for that IG report, but I don't think we're going too far out on a limb to say that, like, substantively speaking, there were problems with these chemicals, and right. The EPA, at least in middle management, was ignoring them because they weren't, I guess, essentially getting the proper protection from outside influence.
Yeah, I mean, they were cracking down on these scientists who were trying to do their job, which is to protect the public from the harms of chemicals. And when they said, we think these are harmful, which they didn't have any ulterior motivation for saying that, they faced retribution.
Sharon Lerner, writer at ProPublica, covering health and the environment. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.